The first time I truly understood, the fog in my head was so thick I could barely find a word for the color of the curtains. Peach. A rather vulgar, optimistic peach. I was in my chair. The high-backed damask one David always said made me look like a queen on a very comfortable throne, and I was listening. The ability to move my body had been stolen by a patch of black ice and a shattered hip, but the ability to listen, that, they had underestimated Sophie, my angel, my savior, was in the hall. Her voice was a perfect glissando of professional sympathy. "Mr. Harrison, I'm so glad you called back," she murmured just outside my door, clearly believing I was lost in my mid-morning nap. "No, I'm afraid she's simply not up to calls. She's, she's very confused today. She mistook me for her sister this morning, the one who died in 1983. A beat of silence, I pictured my lawyer, a man whose patience was as starched as his shirts, frowning into the receiver. "Oh, absolutely," Sophie continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried like a stage command. "Emily is just heartsick about it. We're doing everything we can. Yes, the paperwork. Emily mentioned you had reservations? I see. Well, as her primary caregiver, I can assure you her state is declining. Rapidly. We just want to be prepared to manage her affairs. For her own good." She hung up. I heard the subtle click of the receiver, a sound as final as a closing coffin lid. My affairs. Manage my affairs. A moment later, Sophie glided back into the room, a beatific smile plastered on her face. She was carrying a tray. On it was my 11 a.m. pain management. "How are we feeling, Agatha? Did we have a nice little rest?" I looked at her, the crisp white uniform, the kind, clear eyes, the gentle hands. And I remembered my daughter, Emily, standing in this exact spot 3 weeks ago, her arms crossed, her smile as tight as a badly drawn bow. "Mom, she'll take care of you like family," Emily had insisted, her voice brittle with forced cheer. I stared at the pills in the little paper cup. She was right. Sophie was exactly like family. She just never specified whose family. The Borgias, perhaps. It began, as most tragedies do, with a moment of mundane farce. Agatha Crawford, who had faced down narcissistic directors, enraged playwrights, and a full house of coughing patrons during a matinee of Long Day's Journey into Night, was felled by a patch of ice on my own damn doorstep. The snap of the femur was definitive. It was loud, rude, and utterly inconvenient. From the hospital bed, the world looked different. It looked beige, and it looked, much to my chagrin, like I needed help. Emily swept in, not with flowers, but with a color-coded binder. My daughter has always treated life as an inefficient project she is uniquely qualified to manage. At 51, she maintained the glossy, frantic energy of a startup CEO, even though I knew, from the hushed, angry phone calls I'd accidentally overheard, that her various ventures were circling the drain. "Mom, you can't possibly stay here," she'd said, gesturing around my Upper West Side apartment, a place I had lived in for 45 years, a place where every book, every painting, every scratch on the floor told a story. "And where precisely do you suggest I go, Emily? A kennel? A home?" she snapped, then softened, realizing her script. A lovely place. With activities." I gave her the look, the one I used to reserve for particularly terrible productions of Chekhov. "If I see a single game of bingo, I am writing you out of the will." "You're impossible!" she cried, the practiced veneer cracking. This was the Emily I knew. I am trying to help you. I have a business to run. I can't be here every 5 minutes. Then don't be, I said, tired. The pain was a dull, throbbing bass note. I'll hire a nurse. No. Her response was too fast, too sharp. No, you need consistency. You need someone full-time, someone who cares. She reappeared 2 days later with Sophie Bell. I will admit, Sophie was a masterpiece of casting. She was 42, with a face that was both placid and intelligent. She didn't coo. She didn't treat me like a child. She spoke in clear, calm tones. She explained, specialized in in-home geriatric care with a focus on post-operative recovery. Her references were, according to Emily, glowing. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Crawford, she said, her handshake firm and dry. I've read some of your reviews. Your take on the 1998 revival of Cabaret was scathing and entirely correct. She had, in that single sentence, disarmed me more effectively than any fawning platitude. Well, I'd grunted. At least one of us was paying attention. Emily beamed. See, Mom? Perfect. Sophie started the next day, and for the first week, it was perfect. She was a silent, efficient whirlwind. She cooked, not just heated, but cooked meals that were both healthy and delicious. She managed my medication schedule with the precision of a Swiss watch. She bathed me with a dignity I hadn't thought possible in my current state. She was, in short, too good to be true. I am a critic. I am paid, or rather was paid, to see the strings, to spot the cracks in the facade. The first crack was small, subtle. Sophie was inquisitive. This is a magnificent apartment, Agatha, she said one afternoon, ostensibly tidying my desk. These buildings, the co-op boards must be dreadful. They are, I said, my eyes closed. And the upkeep, goodness, the fees alone must be astronomical. I opened one eye. Are you planning on moving in, Sophie? She laughed, a light, airy sound. Oh, goodness, no, I admire it. You've built a beautiful life. Emily is so proud of you. Emily, I said, is proud of the idea of me. She finds the reality rather tedious. Sophie's smile didn't waver, but her eyes cataloged. She wasn't just tidying. She was taking inventory. The second crack was louder. It was the paperweight. It was a baccarat, a swirling, heavy dome of midnight blue and gold flecks. David, my late husband, had given it to me on the opening night of a play I'd eviscerated. To hold down the hate mail, he'd whispered. It sat on my desk, a solid, tangible piece of my past. I was in the living room attempting the pathetic series of leg lifts prescribed by my physical therapist when I heard the crash from the study. It wasn't a loud crash. It was a sickening crack, a dull, final punctuation mark. I yelled. Sophie appeared in the doorway, her hands clasped, her face a perfect mask of horror. Agatha? Oh, my heavens. I am just devastated. She led me, or rather rolled me in my blasted chair, to the study. The paperweight was on the floor, in two jagged, sad pieces. I was just dusting, she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. Real tears. They were good. It just slipped. The polish. It must have been. I am so sorry. I stared at the shattered glass. I felt a coldness creep up my spine that had nothing to do with the drafts in this old building. It was on the center of the desk, Sophie, I said, my voice quiet. It weighed 5 pounds. You would have had to move it to polish under it, and there was no polish on the cloth in your hand. She blinked. The tears stopped, as if on command. I was just trying to be thorough, she stammered. You were? I said. Too thorough. She began to apologize again profusely, but I cut her off. Get the dustpan, dear, and bring me my pain medication. Suddenly my hip is flaring up. She scurried off, all flustered efficiency, but I saw it. As she turned, I saw the brief, cold flash of annoyance in her eyes. Not guilt. Not sadness. Annoyance. The performance had faltered. The mask had slipped. That night, the pain medication seemed different. I've never been a woolly-headed person. Even in pain, I kept my mind sharp. But the pills Sophie gave me, they were not just dulling the ache in my hip, they were blurring the edges of the world. The next morning, I woke up feeling as though my brain had been packed in cotton wool. Words came slowly, thoughts scattered. Just the post-operative fog, dear, Sophie said, fluffing my pillows. Very common, and we had the upset yesterday. You need to rest. Upset, I mumbled. Yes, the paper. The paperweight, she corrected gently. Don't you worry. I told Emily, and she's already looking for a replacement online. My eyes snapped open. It was irreplaceable. Oh, I'm sure we can find a very similar one, she soothed, placing a glass of water on my bedside table. Now, time for our morning pills. She was so helpful, so efficient. She had taken all my bottles, the big, rattling, confusing collection, and organized them into a neat weekly pill box. AM and PM all tidy, all anonymous. What is this one? I asked, pointing to a new, small yellow pill I didn't recognize. Oh, that's just a new supplement Emily and I discussed to help with, the fog. I looked at her. She smiled. I took the pills. The fog got worse. And then came the isolation. My phone, my lifeline, began to act strangely. My old friend, Eleanor, called every day at 10 a.m. One day, the phone simply didn't ring. Oh, the ringer must be off, Sophie said, checking it. Silly me. The next day, I tried to call Eleanor back. There was no dial tone. Goodness, the line must be dead, Sophie said, looking concerned. I'll report it. Don't you worry, Agatha. I'm here. You don't need anyone else. She said it with such finality. It was 2 days later that I overheard the phone call with Mr. Harrison, my lawyer. The call that confirmed my creeping, terrified suspicion. They weren't just managing my recovery. They were managing my decline. I stared at the pills in the paper cup she offered. Did we have a nice rest? She'd asked. I gave her my best, most tremulous, confused old lady smile. Oh, yes, dear, it was lovely. Did my sister visit? Sophie's eyes lit up, a flicker of triumph, quickly masked by sympathy. No, Agatha, your sister, she's not here. Oh, I said, my voice breaking. I get so muddled. I know, she said, stroking my hand. I know. That's why I'm here, to take care of you, like family. I swallowed the pills, or rather, I pretended to. It's time, I thought, as the bitter coating dissolved on my tongue, for the critic to write a new ending. The first rule of counter-espionage, I decided, was to embrace the role they had cast me in. If they wanted a confused, deteriorating old woman, I would give them a command performance. I would be Lear on the Heath, Blanche Dubois on a bad day. I would be, in short, magnificent. The second rule was harder. I had to get my mind back. That afternoon, Sophie brought my lunch tray. On it was the ubiquitous paper cup of pills. "Here we are, Agatha. Let's get these down you. They'll make you feel so much better." "Oh, more pills?" I whimpered, letting my hand tremble. I I don't like them. They make my head swimmy." "Nonsense," she said, her voice firm, the care replaced by a brisk nurse-like authority. "Dr. Matthews insists. Emily insists. They're for your own good. Now open." I put them in my mouth. I took the glass of water. I made a great show of swallowing, my throat bobbing, followed by a grimace. Sophie watched me like a hawk. She always watched. "Good girl," she said, patting my head. It was the pat that did it. The sheer, infantilizing condescension I nearly bit her. She took the tray and left for the kitchen. The moment I heard the water running, I spat the entire, sodden, half-dissolved mess into my palm. The taste was vile, a chemical bitterness that stung my tongue. I looked around, frantic. The waste paper basket? Too obvious. She'd check under the cushion? Amateur. My eyes landed on it. In the corner, by the window, sat an enormous, hideous Phalaenopsis orchid. It was an Emily gift. It had arrived 2 days after my fall, a monstrosity of puce-colored blossoms. "It thrives on neglect, Mom." Her card had read, a piece of casual cruelty she probably didn't even recognize. I wheeled myself over, the protesting squeak of the chair covering my grunts of pain. My hip screamed. I ignored it. Using my index finger, I dug a small hole in the damp potting medium. With a shudder of disgust, I shoved the pasty, toxic wad of pills into the soil and covered it up. "There," I whispered to the plant. "A little something for your nerves." I was back in my chair, breathing heavily, when Sophie returned. "All settled?" she asked. "Just admiring the flower, dear?" I mumbled. "It's so purple." "It's pink, Agatha." "Oh, yes, silly me." Thus, the orchid stratagem was born. Twice a day, I took my pills. Twice a day, I fed the orchid. It was a disgusting, risky ritual. I had to palm them, hold them in my cheek, or pretend to choke, all while Sophie watched. Her surveillance was constant. She was tidying, fluffing, organizing. She was a shark in a crisp, white uniform, gliding silently through my life, and I was the bleeding seal. But with every dose I didn't take, the fog began to lift. Slowly, the world sharpened. Colors became distinct. My thoughts, which had been sluggish and disjointed, began to line up, to march, and I began to observe. I observed Sophie. She spent an inordinate amount of time on her cell phone, always in the hallway, her voice a low, urgent murmur. She had a new, expensive-looking handbag. She had a key to my private desk, the one where I kept my checkbooks and financial statements. I knew this because I'd placed a single human hair across the lock, a trick I'd seen in a rather pulpy spy novel. The hair was gone. I observed Emily. She visited more frequently, but our chats were a farce. "You're looking more rested, Mom," she'd say, staring at her phone. She never looked at me. Not really. She looked at the art on my walls. She looked at the silver. She looked at her inheritance. "Sophie is nice," I'd murmur, slurring my words. "She's the best, Mom. We're so lucky." I was talking to my financial advisor, and he said, "We really need to get your affairs in order. It's just prudent." "Prudent," I repeated, as if the word were a foreign object. "Yes, and Mr. Harrison is being so difficult. He doesn't seem to understand the urgency. He doesn't see how frail you are." "Frail," I echoed. She sighed, a dramatic put-upon sound. We may have to make some changes, Mom. Get someone who understands, someone with power of attorney, just to help pay your bills. Sophie's salary, for instance. It's it's a lot, and your accounts are complicated. Aha, the hook. Whatever you think best, darling, I whispered, and let my eyes flutter closed. Faking a sudden drug-induced nap, I heard her stand up. Sophie, she hissed. She's fading fast. I'll call the notary. Tell him to be ready. We'll try for Friday. Harrison will have a fit, but by then, what's he gonna do? She'll be legally declared incompetent. A new feeling bloomed in my chest, pushing past the fear, past the humiliation. It was a cold, sharp, invigorating rage. They were bringing in a notary. They were accelerating the timeline. I had to accelerate mine. I needed an ally. My gaze fell on the front door. Not the door itself, but the man who guarded it. Frank Mooney. Frank had been the head doorman in this building for 25 years. He was a quiet, silver-haired man, a Vietnam vet who missed nothing and said little. He had carried my groceries, fixed my AC with a well-placed kick, and after David died, had simply appeared at my door with a pot of coffee and a copy of the Times, sat with me for an hour in total silence, and then left. It was the most profound gesture of comfort I'd ever received. Sophie naturally despised him. He's so nosy, she'd complained after Frank had insisted on personally delivering a package. I really don't think we should be letting him in the apartment, Agatha, for security. He is security, you ninny, I'd wanted to say. Instead, I'd mumbled, oh, yes, security. Now I needed him, but how to reach him? Sophie never left me alone. Never. She even assisted me in the bathroom, a new daily humiliation that I now realized was not about my safety, but about her control. She was a warden. I had to create an opportunity. That night, I had a turn. I became difficult. No, I shouted. When Sophie tried to give me my evening pills, I swept the cup from her hand. The pills scattered across the hardwood. No, you witch! Sophie's eyes widened, then narrowed. This was not in the script. Agatha, calm down. You'll hurt yourself. Get out! I shrieked. I threw my water glass. It hit the wall, shattering. I want David! It was a brilliant performance, if I did say so myself, full-throated, raw, a little messy. Sophie was, for the first time, genuinely flustered. She grabbed her phone. That's it. I'm calling Emily. You're having an episode. You need a stronger dose. She bustled out of the room, her voice rising in panic as she speed-dialed my daughter. Emily? You need to get here. She's violent. This was my chance. My hip felt like it was on fire, held together by rusted bolts. I didn't care. I grabbed my walker, the one I was supposed to be too weak to use, and pushed myself upright. Every step was an agony. I gripped the furniture, my knuckles white, dragging myself from the living room, down the hall. My target, the bathroom. Why the bathroom? Because it was the one place Frank, in his official capacity, might have a reason to enter. The plumbing in this building was ancient. I reached the bathroom, my breath sobbing in my chest. I fumbled in my cosmetic bag. My hand closed around it. My victory red lipstick. A defiant, bloody shade I hadn't worn in years. I looked at the mirror. My reflection was a horror. A wild-eyed, white-haired crone. My hand was shaking, not from weakness, but from adrenaline. I didn't have much time. What to write? A complex message was impossible. I needed something simple, something that would alarm him specifically. I scrawled on the cold glass, the wax an ugly smear. Frank. She has my keys. Poison. Orchid. Lawyer. Help. It was a mess, a jumble, but it had the key words, his name, poison, lawyer. I heard Sophie's voice, still in the hall. I don't know what set her off. Yes, I have the new prescription. I'll pick it up tomorrow. The stronger one. Tomorrow. I was running out of tomorrows. I grabbed a hand towel, shoved it into the toilet bowl, and hit the flush. Water immediately began to well up, pouring over the rim. "Oh dear," I yelled, in my most pathetic, frail old lady voice. "Oh goodness, Sophie, the water, it's everywhere." I dragged myself back to the hall, collapsing onto the carpet just as Sophie ran in, her face pale with fury. "What? What did you do?" she shrieked, seeing the flood. It just happened," I cried, bursting into fake tears. For the next 10 minutes, there was chaos. Sophie, cursing under her breath, threw every towel we had on the floor. This is, I can't, you'll have to call Frank," I sobbed. He knows the shut-off." Sophie's eyes shot to mine. Suspicion. She knew I'd trapped her. But the water was spreading. It was threatening the antique rugs. It was threatening the assets. With a growl, she grabbed the building intercom. "Frank, we have an emergency in 12B. A plumbing issue." I lay on the floor, a damp, pathetic heap, and I smiled. Frank was here in 2 minutes. He took in the scene with one sweeping glance. Sophie, furious and dripping. Me, unconscious on the floor. The flooded bathroom. "Ma'am," he said to Sophie, his voice flat. He strode past her. He saw me, and for half a second his expression tightened. He knelt. "Mrs. Crawford, you all right?" "She fainted," Sophie snapped. "Just deal with the toilet." Frank stood up. He walked into the bathroom. I held my breath. He was in there for a long time. I heard him shut off the water valve. I heard the plunging. Then he came out. He was holding the offending towel. He looked at Sophie. "It's a towel, ma'am. Someone must have dropped it." "She threw it," Sophie said, her voice cracking. She's insane." Frank's gaze moved from her to the mirror. I watched him. He read the message. His eyes didn't widen. He didn't gasp. He simply read it. Then, very deliberately, he met my eyes. I was still on the floor, and I gave him the tiniest, almost imperceptible wink. He turned back to Sophie. "I'll go get the wet vac. You should probably get Mrs. Crawford into bed." He left. Sophie, trembling with rage, hauled me to my feet and threw me into my chair. You awful old woman," she spat, her mask gone, her true face revealed. "You think this is a game? You just wait. You just wait until Emily gets here. We'll see who's laughing then." She stormed off to get a mop, leaving her phone on the hall table. She was right. It wasn't a game. It was a war, and I had just recruited my first soldier. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. They were a play, a terrible, grueling 2-act performance of my own decline. Frank had done his part. The morning after the flood, he appeared at my door with a large, boxy, industrial-grade dehumidifier. "Building policy, ma'am," he'd said to Sophie, his face a perfect blank. "Gotta run this for 48 hours to prevent mold. It's loud." Sophie, who was now sleep-deprived and vibrating with impatience, argued. "That's ridiculous. It will disturb her." Orders from the co-op board, Frank said, unmoving. He wheeled the machine into the living room, plugged it in, and flicked a switch. A deafening, glorious roar filled the apartment. "Sorry for the noise!" Frank yelled over the din. And as he passed me, he slipped a small, folded piece of paper into the pocket of my housecoat Sophie, screaming about the noise. Didn't see a thing. The note was simple, a child's scrawl. Lawyer H is on it. Be ready. Friday. Friday. That was tomorrow. It was the day Emily and the notary were coming. My new prescription, the stronger one, sat on the counter. Sophie was terrified to give it to me now, after my violent episode. She was also terrified not to. She was caught in a trap of her own making. I solved her dilemma. I became a model of docility. I cried. I apologized. I don't know what came over me, Sophie, I whispered, when she brought me my now regular, non-lethal breakfast. I was scared. I thought you were my sister, the one who hit me. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, a backstory, a motivation. Sophie bought it, or she wanted to. She was desperate. It's okay, Agatha, she said, her voice tight. It's the illness. Now, we have a busy day tomorrow. Emily is coming with a friend to help with your finances. We need you calm. Oh, yes, I said. Calm. I'll take my pills. I took the pills. I fed the orchid. The plant, I noted with grim satisfaction, was looking terrible. Its leaves were yellowing, the puce-colored blossoms drooping as if in despair. It was, quite literally, dying from the poison I'd been fed. It was the perfect metaphor, and I hoped the perfect evidence. I spent the rest of the day sleeping, my mind racing, planning the final act. The noise of the dehumidifier was my shield, allowing me to think without Sophie checking on me every 5 minutes. Friday arrived. Sophie was a bundle of nerves. She dressed me, not in my usual silk bed jacket, but in a nightgown. A faded, shapeless, pathetic thing. It was a costume. The confused old woman. "There," she said, pulling my hair back tightly. You look comfortable." I wanted to say, like a corpse. "Emily will be here at noon," she said, checking her watch for the 100th time. "And the notary, Mr. Sachs. You be nice, Agatha. You just sign where he tells you. It's to help Emily, to help us." "Us," I mumbled. "Yes, us." At 11:55, the doorbell rang. Sophie took a deep, shuddering breath. "Showtime," she muttered, and went to open it. I heard Emily's voice, high and false. "Mom, we're here. We've brought Mr. Sachs, just to help with those papers we talked about." I heard the shuffling of feet, a man's cough. "She's in the living room," Sophie said. She's had a calm morning, but, she's frail." Of course. A reedy male voice said, "This will only take a moment, just a signature. For the conservatorship." Conservatorship. The final, ugly word. The cage. "Come in," I called, my voice surprisingly strong in the sudden silence. Sophie had, I noted, turned off the dehumidifier. She wanted the notary to hear my confused answers. They entered the room. Emily, in a severe navy blue suit, looking like a vulture attending a stockholders' meeting. Sophie, hovering at her elbow, pale and sweating. And a small, nervous man with a briefcase, who must be Mr. Sachs. They stopped. They stopped because the scene was not as they had expected. I was not alone. Sitting in the wingback chair opposite mine, holding a teacup, was Mr. Harrison, my lawyer. Standing by the window, his arms crossed, was Frank Mooney, and standing by the fireplace, looking rather imposing in their uniforms, were two officers of the New York Police Department. Emily's face was a study. It went from a practiced, sympathetic smile to confusion to raw, unfiltered panic, all in the space of 3 seconds. "Mom? What is this?" she stammered. Who are these men?" Sophie looked like she was going to be physically ill. Her eyes darted from the police, to me, to the door. "Why, Emily, darling," I said, my voice as clear and cold as the ice that had started this whole affair. "You're late, and you've brought an audience." I gestured to the nervous man with the briefcase. "Mr. Sachs, I presume. Please sit. You're about to be a witness to, well, to something." Mr. Sachs dropped his briefcase. "What is the meaning of this?" Emily demanded, finding her voice. "Mr. Harrison, I told you my mother was not to be disturbed. She's not competent. She's... Tell them, Sophie. Tell them how confused she is." Sophie opened her mouth, but only a small squeak came out. "Oh, she's quite right, Mr. Harrison," I said, sipping my own tea. Frank had made it. It was excellent. "I have been very confused. For weeks I've been living in a fog. Isn't that right, Sophie?" All eyes turned to Sophie. I... It's a funny thing, that fog," I continued, setting my cup down with a delicate click. "It came in these," I pointed to the weekly pill organizer on the table, "and it went right there." I pointed to the dying orchid in the corner. What are you talking about?" Emily hissed, her eyes wild. She's mad. This proves it. She's talking about plants." "No, I'm talking about evidence," I said. "Officer, if you'd be so kind, my friend Frank has been watering it. But I believe you'll find the soil to be of particular interest." One of the officers, a tall woman with intelligent eyes, moved toward the plant. She put on a glove, took a small evidence bag from her pocket, and dug her fingers into the potting mix. She pulled out a clod of soil, and embedded within it, like grotesque little jewels, were the chalky, half-dissolved, multicolored remnants of dozens of pills. The yellow ones, the blue ones, the ones that made my head swimmy, a collective, sharp intake of breath. That's... Sophie crumpled, not fainted. She crumpled, folding in on herself like a wet paper bag. She made me. Emily, Shut up, you idiot, Emily screamed, lunging at her. The other officer stepped between them. "Ma'am, I'd stay right where you are." Mr. Harrison stood up. "For the record," he said, his voice booming in the suddenly silent room, "we have Ms. Bell's phone records, showing daily, sometimes hourly calls with Ms. Crawford. We have a signed, witnessed affidavit from Frank Mooney detailing the message he found. And we have the orchid." He turned to the notary. "Mr. Sachs, you are here to witness the signing of a document granting Ms. Emily Crawford full medical and financial power of attorney over her incapacitated mother, correct?" Sachs nodded, mute. "And were you aware," Mr. Harrison continued, "that Ms. Crawford's incapacity was being, shall we say, curated by systematic chemical restraint? That this was a conspiracy to commit fraud, and given the dosages, quite possibly attempted murder, for the sole purpose of liquidating her mother's estate to cover Ms. Crawford's own rather significant debts?" Emily made a sound, a low animal wail. The officers were moving, cuffing a sobbing, babbling Sophie. "She's lying!" Emily shrieked, pointing at me. She's a critic. She twists words. She hates me. She's always hated me." I looked at my daughter, my glossy, frantic, bankrupt daughter. I saw the desperation, I saw the rot, and for a moment I felt not pity. No, never pity. I felt an ending. The end of a very long, very bad play. "No, Emily," I said, my voice quiet. "I don't hate you. I don't like you. There's a difference." I turned to the officers. "She's the other one. The brains, such as they are." As they took her, as she passed me, her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred, she spat at me. You bitch! I gave you the perfect caregiver. I gave you family." I met her gaze. "Yes, you did, dear. And as you're about to find out, so does the state." They were let out. The apartment was finally, blessedly quiet. It's been 6 months. My hip has healed mostly. I walk with a cane, which I find rather distinguished. My new caregiver is a woman named Maria. She's from the Bronx, built like a linebacker, and has a laugh like a foghorn. She's magnificent. She cheats at gin rummy, and I let her. Frank comes up for tea every Tuesday. He brings me a pastry, the good kind, from the French bakery, not the sawdust-filled ones Emily used to buy. The apartment is quieter, but it's a good quiet. It's my quiet. Emily and Sophie, well, their performances were not well received by the critics. Their defense was a farce. The orchid, which I insisted on keeping, I've repotted it, and it's thriving, was Exhibit A. The phone records, the bank statements, showing Emily's desperate shell game. They took a plea. They got cared for. I often think about that phrase. Like family. It was a curse. It was a threat. It was a weapon. Emily thought she was writing my final chapter, reducing me to a prop in her own sordid drama. But she forgot who I am. I am not the prop. I am not the set dressing. I am the critic. And I have always, always had the last word.